Hello there and welcome. My name's Chris Cann with Mining Journal, and with me I have Bill Johnston, MLA with the Labor Party and Government in Western Australia. Bill held the portfolios for, most relevantly, engagement with Asia and mining as well, amongst a few other central portfolios for Western Australia from 2017 until last year. Bill's also speaking to us at our Future of Mining Asia event in Singapore in September, and passing through London, he's been generous enough to pop in and spend some time with us. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Western Australia, arguably the foremost jurisdiction for mining in the world. How much of that reputation and that thriving resources economy is down to good policy, good admin, and how much of that is just good luck and great rocks?
Well, there's no question that we've had good luck in having great rocks in Western Australia, and the good news is that only 20% of the state has been explored, so there's still lots of exploration upside in Western Australia. But you really need good policy to have an effective mining industry. You have to have a stable investment environment if you want to get those long-term investments that all the mining jurisdictions in the world are seeking.
When you say only 20% explored, that's really interesting for me, because obviously you would think there's a huge amount of opportunity out there, but is it a case of all the good stuff being picked over, or do you see an exponential opportunity there for the ground that's been left?
We really do see that there's a lot of upside in exploration possibility in Western Australia. New technologies, new approaches are showing that we can find mineralisation where we didn't expect before. That's why the Government of Western Australia is investing in the exploration incentive scheme, half of which goes to the pre-competitive geophysics, so that companies can target their exploration more effectively, and the other half of the exploration incentive scheme goes to support innovative and new areas for exploration. So we think there's a lot of upside for exploration in Western Australia.
You raise a really interesting point there about the technology that's needed. Obviously, being a Tier 1 jurisdiction, policy and admin is helpful. Skills are really good, but the obvious opportunities probably have been found. How crucial do you see exploration technology, and how far do you think it has advanced in terms of delivering that next tier of world-class deposits for Western Australia and the world?
Well, I think that technology is an essential element of the next great discoveries, and I just use Havieron as the example. The ore body's 400 metres undercover, so you can see that traditional rock chipping methodologies aren't going to work on those types of projects. We've had a complete new understanding of the large-scale systems geology in Western Australia, and that's helped us find deposits closer to Perth, like the Gonaville polymetallic metallic discovery. So technology helps in driving new discoveries, and it's if all the easy to find outcrops have been developed, then this is a new opportunity to find the mineral wealth that sits undercover right across Western Australia.
Western Australia's economy, as mentioned, is largely dependent, or centres at least, on extractive industries, specifically mining or largely mining. How has that influence shaped Western Australia as a state in terms of policy and just the way of life?
Well, Western Australians, 135,000 West Australians work in the mining industry. That's about 15% of our workforce. And then when you add in service industries and continued economic impacts into the broader economy, over a quarter of the population is directly related to the mining industry. That's probably the most intense level of employment of any jurisdiction in the world. So there's no question that Western Australians understand the mining industry. There's very few places in the world where everybody discusses the price of iron ore over a cup of coffee because Western Australia is so directly impacted by the mining industry. But it also means there's this strong ecosystem of entrepreneurial spirit, technologies, particularly in the exploration sector, mining service companies. Anywhere in the world, whether it's in Western Australia or somewhere else, if you've got a difficult to develop project, there'll be an Australian there making sure the project can work.
Does that make it easier to permit operations in Western Australia? I mean, you kind of look around the world, huge issue with a lot of projects and delivering metals for the energy transition. Overcoming that ignorance is a regular citation of the industry. Is that a benefit of Western Australia, like a massive benefit?
Yeah, there's no question that it's a massive benefit that we have a very established regulatory framework. And look at the Pilbara Minerals Pilgangora project, 4 years from discovery to production. There's not many places in the world that could do that. Certainly, our good friends in Canada and the United States can't believe how quickly we can move in Western Australia, and where it can take decades just to get a tenement issued, we can move quickly because everybody in government, everybody in the community understands the needs of mining. That isn't to say that we skip steps. You have to get your consents from traditional owners, Aboriginal people, Indigenous communities. You have to get your environmental approvals done. But the good news is that our bureaucracy, our community understands the needs of mining and makes sure that we can move quickly to give a yes or no on a project.
Are there foundations for setting up that framework? It sounds like, and from our experience, obviously, it's a lot easier, if not perfect, it is a lot easier than most places in the world. Are there foundations that the policy and the administration is built on that can be applied regionally agnostically?
Absolutely. We engage, the Government of Western Australia through our mining agency, engages with other governments, particularly in Africa, in skills transfer and capacity building, because we do think that many of the policy settings that we have in Western Australia are transferable to other jurisdictions. We think that it would benefit those domestic jurisdictions as well as investors if they were to apply those learnings. Indeed, when we engage with countries in Asia that are looking at mining, we make the point to them that if they give a stable long-term investment environment, they'll get stable long-term investment. If they continually only provide short-term approvals and change the regulatory framework, they'll get investors who take a short-term approach. And if you're really looking for that long-term engagement from industry, well, you need to provide that long-term stable investment environment too.
Looking at Asia specifically, obviously with Future of Mining Asia coming up in September, one of the key differences between jurisdictions in Asia and Western Australia is from a mining perspective, WA is gifted with a population density of something like, I think it's 0.74 people per square kilometre.
Yeah.
That's really helpful when you're
Sure.
trying to permit mines.
Correct.
Are there any ways that you see of getting past that issue of population densities and potential opposition to, no matter how essential, what is essentially it is an extractive, it is a high impact industry such as mining?
Yeah, I mean, look, we do have mines close to the metropolitan area, but certainly we don't have the population densities that our friends in Asia have, and we appreciate that every jurisdiction is going to respond to the particularities of their community, and that's appropriate. But there are things that we think they could learn, or that our example is there to look at, and that includes the need to do the mine closure plan alongside the mine plan itself. So we require a miner to explain what the final landform will look like at the time they're applying to start the mine, and then every time they update their mine plan, which they're required to do every 5 years, we require them to update their mine closure plan so that the community can see what's going to happen at the end of the mine, right from the first. Sometimes there will be a mine void left at the end of the project, but if the community understands what's going to happen, then it's easier for them to decide whether they want that to occur.
Okay. Western Australia, Western Australian focused mining companies and development groups, explorers, are blessed with a very helpful government and administrative process. Equally, the government is blessed with a mining community that generally knows what it's doing, and it probably does these best practice community engagement things as now hopefully as standard practice. Are they things that you feel can be picked up and just put anywhere. The kinds of processes when you engage communities to get that social license, and how would you like to see that process run in a best case scenario?
Yeah, I mean, every community is going to have their own particular issues to deal with. So it's not that you can just transfer everything from Australia to another jurisdiction. We're not that arrogant to think that that would be able to occur. But we do think there's a few key elements. So there's been a long history between the mining industry and First Nations people. Hasn't always been a good history, but it's strong and improving now. So we think that that's an opportunity. We've learned from others, and we think that others can learn from us at the same time. Benefit sharing with local communities, I think that's something that needs to always be considered. Our royalty regime, we have an ad valorem regime. Some people prefer a profit-based approach. Of course, the Commonwealth Government still taxes profits, but we just have an ad valorem royalty scheme. That means, again, that both sides understand exactly where they stand at the start. There's a whole range of opportunities, we think, for exchange of views with our friends in Asia, and we're keen to continue to do that.
Any lessons in policy making and administration for the mining sector that you've had to learn the hard way?
Oh, look, there's no questions that our history of relationships with First Nations people hasn't been strong in Western Australia. If you go back 20 or 30 years ago, there was strong conflict, but we think we're starting to move past that because both sides have learnt to live with the other side. Our federal government legislation in respect of native title is very strong. You can't issue a mining tenement in Western Australia without either the consent of the First Nations traditional owners of the site or the approval of a court process. So, the mining industry in Western Australia has come to terms with that, and that usually includes benefit sharings with the traditional owners, and that's a way of providing, strong opportunities for development for local communities. We think that's something that we've had to learn over time. And again, there's always improvement in environmental performance, and expectations of environmental outcomes have changed over time. We now, particularly in iron ore and those large scale mining, look to in-pit waste disposal, so that reduces the impact on landform. So, we are trying to get better all the time, and we think that's something that we can share with others.
When things do go wrong, and corporates, as they occasionally do, and as you say, the industry hasn't got the best reputation, or hasn't got an unblemished record historically. When you do these days get bad actors from a corporate citizenship or an environmental best practice standpoint, is there a temptation to make examples of them to appease the many stakeholder groups that have an issue with extractive industries, or is the most important thing, as difficult as it might be, just to adhere to the right regulation and breaches of that regulation?
Well, I mean, we don't, in dealing with breaches, we're not concerned about people's opinions. We're just interested in the facts in respect of whether it should be done in public or private. We certainly think that all penalties should be known to the community. There's often been a long process of engagement with the developers before we get to the point of applying sanctions. But a strong sanction regime is important. Otherwise, there's no penalty for bad behaviour. And we're very pleased that most companies in Western Australia are now voluntarily meeting best practice, but that means those that don't need to be held to account for that.
Bill, you spent several years as the Minister for Asian Engagement,
Yep.
if that's the correct
Correct
official title.
Yes.
What's your understanding from that period and since then on the mining industry in Asia? Obviously diverse, several jurisdictions. Where do you see the obvious opportunities?
Yeah, so I mean, in our Asian engagement strategy, the Government of Western Australia sees 6 countries as being, all countries are important, but the 6 countries we see as being critical to us, and that's our 3 existing partners in Japan, Korea, and China, and our 3 emerging partners in India, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And so we think there's a lot of opportunity in the services sector. So we'd happily see raw material sales. We happily see Australian companies investing in these jurisdictions, but we also see the opportunity for Australian services, including mining services, being made available to these jurisdictions. I'll just give you India as the example. India has a very inefficient mining industry. We think that we would be an ideal partner for training the workforce in India, training the leadership of the mining sector in India, exchanging leaders and regulators so that everybody's got a better understanding of the mature jurisdiction, what we've learned over time. And we think some of our mining service companies would be able to provide additional benefits to the Indian mining industry. So that's just an example. There are many others, but that would be able to improve the Indian mining industry for the benefit of the Indian nation. It's not about just having foreign investors getting an advantage, which is, we support foreign investment. We think countries should accept foreign investment. But if you actually look past that, the debate about foreign investment, there are benefits for the domestic users of mining materials if you've got more efficient mines. So we think there's a good opportunity for partnership in Asia.
Sure. And some of those efficiencies and some of those best practices, they in places like Western Australia, they're crucial for that social license piece and
Yes.
permitting. Are they as crucial in places like India and potentially some of the other emerging economies or even more mature economies of Asia?
So, you can see in some parts of Asia where you have a project that doesn't come to market because they can't find a pathway that supports either international investment to bring the project to market, or they can't find the skills and talents they need to develop the project domestically. So by engaging with Western Australian industry and government, we think that countries can choose for themselves whether they're using international investment to bring the project on or domestic investment, but better technology from a more experienced jurisdiction. But either way, we think that this is an opportunity to unlock value in our Asian partners.
Okay. And that relationship, the way it's described, they're very much a win-win scenario with certain jurisdictions. Do you feel that there is a more altruistic responsibility on Western Australia, potentially Australia, though I won't ask you to comment on federal policy, to be a leader among the region as part of the Australasian region in terms of raising standards, or does it need to be always a quid pro quo?
Well, we don't see it as a quid pro quo. We think that we want to be a strong partner for our friends in Asia, and we'd like to assist them how they choose. This is a matter for them to choose their pathway. But what we're saying, we don't do international relations at the state government level. We certainly respect the federal government's rights in that space. But what we want to do is both as a government and on behalf of industry in Western Australia is to lay out the opportunities that countries can enjoy through the sort of partnership that I've described.
You mentioned the partnership with China, a huge trading partner with Western Australia. I think recently, because of policy, China dropped out of the top 10 FDI partners for Australia. There's not many secrets around people's views on that relationship. Could I just get your feel for the importance of the relationship firstly, and then how it's been managed and where you see it going from here?
Yeah, look, I think, I don't remember the actual statistics, but it's about 30% of Western Australia's economy is our trade with Asia, with China. So, there's no question of the importance of our relationship with China, and the current Premier, Roger Cook, and the previous Premier, Mark McGowan, worked very hard on our relationship with China. Mark McGowan visited China. Roger Cook visited China since the end of COVID restrictions. We're very pleased that direct air services have recommenced with mainland China. China is an important trading partner with us. The federal government controls the question of foreign direct investment. We don't really comment on that. But what we would say is that we're very pleased by the level of investment that we've seen from Chinese industry into Western Australia, and projects like the Sino Iron project, multi-billion-dollar. As I understand, single largest Chinese investment in a Western country anywhere in the world. 3,000 West Australians work at that project. They've got highly skilled, high wage jobs, exactly what we're looking for. So the Tianqi joint venture with IGO has delivered a lithium hydroxide plant, one of the first lithium hydroxide plants outside China. That's a clear opportunity for Western Australia. So we're very pleased by some of the investments that have been made by Chinese businesses in Western Australia.
Are you worried by some of the rhetoric and also some of the policy coming out of both China and Australia in terms of actual conflict?
Well, firstly, I respect the fact the federal government knows more about international relations than I do, and they must have their own reasons for making the decisions they do. So I don't question those at all. All I can lay out for you is the benefits and that our relationship has achieved in respect of the Chinese perspective. Again, I'm not arrogant enough to think I can sit in their chairs, but what I would say is that lower tariffs on Western Australian agricultural products is good for China, because it means that the high quality agricultural products that were being limited, had their availability limited in China, meant that Chinese consumers were missing out on the benefits of those products. So regularising our trading relationship with China didn't impact the resources industry, but it did impact our agriculture sector, is good for both sides. I'm an internationalist. I think that people, domestic consumers get a benefit from international trade. Open borders provides benefits to both the importing country and the exporting country. So, to the extent that we can maximise those benefits, that's good for Australia and good for China.
The sustainability piece is a central part of the future of mining agenda. It will be in Asia. It is in Perth. It's also a pillar of SGX and Enterprise Singapore, which are our partners there. Are there some easy wins that you can see in terms of applying some of the technology and services that you mentioned before, just to raise that bar a little bit for some of the emerging extractive industries across Asia?
Absolutely. I mean, we're learning strongly about on-site renewable energy. Over half the electricity used in Western Australia is not distributed through a grid. It's generally on-site power at mining and mining-related projects. So we can see the rolling out of new technologies in those mine sites. And what Australia, West Australian business brings to the table there is that we're experienced at integrating all these separate technologies to make them work in an independent way on a particular mine site. The West Australian government owns state-owned enterprise Horizon Power that provides electricity for remote communities, has an extraordinary level of talent in remote power operations. And so just as an example, with 138 Indigenous communities across our state, we're rolling out renewable energy projects at each one of those. That's just the same as Eastern Islands and Indonesia. And so the technology that's being used on our remote Aboriginal sites could today be applied to reduce diesel use in individual communities in Eastern Indonesia. That would benefit those communities. It would reduce carbon emissions, and it would bring a more reliable power to village communities in Eastern Indonesia. That's just an example of some of the technologies that we have. We don't make the solar panels, we don't make the batteries, but we do have the technology to integrate it all into a solution for remote power.
Laterite mining in Indonesia is regularly cited as a huge environmental issue. Do you see any role for Australia and I suppose those service and technology providers in solving that problem? Might be the wrong term, but at least helping that situation? And should it be a case of access to services if you can show some intent towards reducing that damage?
Well, I mean, I'm not here to reflect on Indonesia's decisions about how they develop their industry. I mean, they've made their own decisions, but what I would say, of course, is that in the new carbon-constrained world, we all have an obligation to reduce carbon emissions, and we certainly think that in the nickel space, those companies that are using lower carbon and lower environmental processes should be rewarded for their work. And so, if there was perhaps some price reflectivity, that might be something that's be helpful to the Australian industry, and then it would be up to others to decide what they wanted to do with their own industry.
Premium pricing for sustainable metals is a topic people have been talking about for a while.
Yeah.
We're kind of seeing it here and there. Do you think that's a realistic future for the industry? Can you see investors and consumers actually putting their hand in their pocket for more sustainable goods?
I think that customers will need to do that. I'm interested to see the discussion about border adjustment taxes. I think that there is an expectation of better outcomes for embedded carbon in products. I think that would be good for everybody because people would argue, well, you're talking your book for the West Australian nickel industry, and that's probably true. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for other nickel producers to see how they can also apply technology to reduce their carbon emissions. And I admire how quickly that Indonesia's developed its large nickel industry. They've clearly had a good partnership with Chinese investment to make that great achievement. This is another, I'd see it as another opportunity for Indonesian industry to take the benefits available through low carbon technologies as well.
At Future of Mining Asia, you're going to talk to the audience there about critical minerals and Western Australian critical minerals, obviously, specifically.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of a preview about some of the key points that you'll be looking to address during that presentation, and then where you see the opportunities in working with Asian communities, jurisdictions? Is that just about taking advantage of some of the downstream industry partnerships that could be established, or is there more to it?
Well, there's always going to be more to it, but clearly in the short term, we're open for business and we're open for partnerships. There's a whole range of critical minerals that we've got strong relationships into Asia. As Asian countries move up the value chain in their manufacturing, this is an opportunity for them to diversify their supply chains and logistics challenges. Whether it's in the battery industry, whether it's in rare earths, there's going to be increased opportunity for partnership out of Western Australia. We've got the Lynas refinery in Kalgoorlie, engineering complete, in ready to start ramp up. We've got the Eneabba Iluka rare earths plant well into its construction phase. These are real opportunities for partnership in Asia.
You're also involved with the government dialogue sessions that will be happening on as part of the program at Future of Mining. What are you hoping to take home from those discussions, and what are you hoping to bring?
Sure. What I'm hoping to take home is I want to carefully listen to the representatives of other governments. It's very important for West Australians to listen to our friends in Asia. There's always something we can learn. We also want to make sure that we understand their priorities so that we can respond to those. Just as an example, a couple of years ago when I was minister, I was talking to some representatives of one of the provinces in Indonesia about collecting royalties and some of the lessons we've learnt about ensuring that mining companies are making the right contribution. So that's just an example where we listened to what we were being told and we're able to respond to that. So, we want to carefully listen to what governments in Asia are talking about so that we can, provide the right opportunities. At the same time, we want to make sure they understand the opportunities for investment into Western Australia, particularly into that midstream rare earths and critical minerals space. There are carbon benefits for doing processing closer to the mine. We don't think that we want to be a competitor in the in the upstream part, but we think the midstream is something that's a real opportunity in Western Australia.
These kind of robust discussions and opportunities to collaborate, obviously hugely important. What kind of importance or what kind of role do you see future of mining Asia playing for the region in terms of sharing best practice and trying to raise the bar in terms of efficiencies and delivering on all these metals that we need for the energy transition going forward?
Well, the amount of mining that in the future is going to have to expand exponentially. People often don't realise that you can only have an energy transition with a much larger mining industry. So that brings with it a whole range of social licence challenges. And so it's so good that the Future Mining Conference will be able to give us an opportunity to look at those future challenges and discuss what those solutions are, share back best practice, understand perspectives, look to have a clear picture of needs and opportunities for the future. So it's so good that this conference is there to provide a platform to examine future needs.
The other nice benefit, probably equally important, is it is in Formula One week. Are you going to get across and have a look at that?
I'd love to. I went to the Formula One Grand Prix Singapore in 2018 and I immensely enjoyed it. My wife and I looked at going this year, but unfortunately it just doesn't quite suit my diary. So I'm very disappointed that I'm not able to stay on. I'm what Australians call a rev head. I'm deeply into cars. I own a couple of high performance cars myself, so I would have happily stayed on for the weekend, but unfortunately I'll have to be back in Perth.
I'm sure part of our audience would like to hear about these high performance cars, but we haven't got that much time left.
That's right.
So before I let you go, I did want to ask about uranium in Western Australia
Sure.
being fiercely debated at the moment. Do you see a future for uranium mining in Western Australia? And is that a near-term future or something longer term or not at all?
So there's one project in Western Australia that achieved its approvals, and that's still progressing. The fact that it's taking so long for that project to get to conclusion shows that there's many challenges in a financial sense for projects, uranium projects in Western Australia. There's quite a significant global overhang of potential supply for uranium. There's a number of projects around the world that are on care and maintenance, and you'd expect those ones to come back into production. It's not clear to me where the total volumes of uranium production are going to go into the future. In respect of nuclear power in Western Australia, it's just not sensible. We have it's simply not financially or viable in Western Australia. We don't have the industrial infrastructure to support a nuclear power industry in Australia. We're trying to develop one to support future nuclear submarines, but that itself has been proving to be very, very difficult. So it's just not practical. Even if it was technically feasible, it's just not practical for nuclear power in Western Australia. Our market doesn't suit nuclear power. So whilst uranium mining may have a future if it can be proved financially viable, that's different to nuclear power. We're just not technically suitable for nuclear power.
Bill Johnston, thanks very much for your time, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again and seeing you present at Future of Mining Asia in Singapore on September 17 and 18.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk today, and I'm greatly looking forward to coming up to Singapore again and being part of the event.